What's up, Gromies? Welcome to Arroyo Office Hours, your source for free cannabis cultivation education. I am your moderator, Kaisha, and we are on episode 126, our first episode of 2025. So excited to be back in studio. Before we get down to business, we want to send all of our love and support to everyone impacted by these devastating wildfires in LA. We are absolutely thinking about you and want y'all to be safe, all right? All right, with that, Seth, Jason, and Cian, Happy New Year, fellas. How you doing?
Good.
Good.
Doing
All right,
great, Kaisha. Happy New Year.
Good. Well, we're starting the new year out right because we have a very special guest in the house. Who wants to tell the world who's on with us today?
We got Mikey from Woodwide. We love him.
Yay.
He's awesome.
What's up, guys?
Yeah.
What's up,
Big
guys?
fans of Mikey,
Yes.
Big fans of Woodwide. Mike Strupp, co-founder of Woodwide. Let's get started. Mikey, tell us your origin story. You've been doing this for a minute. Let's get into it. Talk to us about your history.
Yeah, I'm born and raised here in Mendocino. We're currently growing in Fort Bragg right now, but I was probably 15 years old when I first started growing cannabis, sneaking around the edge of the property, kind of growing plants in the woods, stashing gallons of water in one side of the property, and then running around through the woods where my parents couldn't see me so I could go water them and try not to get in trouble. And I left and went to college, and I continued to grow some outdoor out there for a while, and broke my leg in the middle of college and came home, got to grow a little outdoor crop. My mom was really cool to be like, hey, you're sitting here with a broken femur, and I had doing nothing. So she let me put some nice 4 plants in the backyard, and that was fun. And graduated college and moved back to Mendocino and kind of fell right into the cannabis scene up here. I was able to tap into a lot of people that I knew that were really growing. We were all growing the Bubba Kush at the time, really big pots. We were really concerned with plant limits at that time. So we were doing big parabolic hoods, with the vertical hanging light bulb, all hand water and crushing, just loving it. I was about the end of 2006 and, just kind of hiding out for a while. Thought I was going to be a cannabis rock star. And
You are.
just
a little bit, yeah.
Well, I mean, thank you, I guess. And was just, we was entering some cannabis cups. It was a big thing that happened around here. A bunch of people got in trouble. I kind of got scared and ran into the bushes a little bit. And then when legalization came on, we looked at our property. It was zoned good enough. We were close enough to 3-phase power. I live here on the coast in Mendocino, so we can grow some outdoor, but it's really a good indoor region, real cool year round. We probably have one of the most steady climates year round, from, day to night and just, summer to winter. It's not that warm here and it's not that cold. So I just started getting into the legal cannabis industry, and I just haven't looked back. We entered the cannabis industry legally with our same 10-gallon pots on rollers with tomato cages, growing really big monster plants, six plants a light. And we had to leave that facility behind. And when we did that, we moved over and built another facility, a 72 lighter, and went to the smaller plants. And that was right around the time that Arroyo was starting up. And I was like, okay, I didn't really know what I was getting into with the smaller plants and the, automatic drippers. I knew I wanted to get into that game and learn the more automated watering, because the every other day hand watering was a lot. I always had quality product, but it was a lot of work. And so it was right around the same time as Arroyo, and I saw that, and the people that I respected in the industry were using Arroyo, and so I jumped right in, and it's been since 2021 that we've been working with Arroyo, and it's been quite a journey. I've gone from not, being a very intuitive grower to trying to use some of the technology now that's out there for me to help propel my grow game to the next level.
And you've reached that next level. So, I mean, I know I'm a big fan of Woodwide. Excellent, beautiful, beautiful flower. You've got some pretty popular strains. Y'all are extremely loved out here.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I saw a long time ago that I was never going to be one of the big guys. I wasn't going to have a huge facility. I was never going to be able to compete by putting out the most. And I saw that if I had things that people wanted that no one else had, that was where I was going to really set myself apart. I think it was 2015 is when I really started popping seeds and finding phenos that no one else had. That was when I found the Viper cookies. It was kind of like my first big strain that I was able to really kind of make some waves with. And I was working with this company, Madrone, around here at the time, and they were really going out, taking our flowers and bringing them to the dispensaries into the Bay Area. And it was the first time you could like see a product that was branded kind of gain traction. And that's when I really hit me like, okay, wow, this is a number one selling strain. People are really loving this. And that's when that's where my passion lies, honestly, is to be able to look through the beans and the genetics. It's like playing the lottery, it's like mining, sifting for gold, you like going through and you find so much stuff that's just not that special. And then when you find something that it really is special, you're like, oh my God, I have something. And that's where I get a lot of my joy from, is to like looking for new things and finding stuff and then being able to, grow it to the best of its potential and then share it with the world.
Yes, you're somebody who has a long background. Like you said, you were an intuitive grower, and then you've just kind of started really learning how to incorporate more tech into what you're doing. Talk a little bit about, you mentioned Arroyo. I know under canopy lighting has been something that has been working really, really well for you. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the technology that you've been kind of leveraging, and like how that is helping support the skills that you already have, that you've been refining over the years.
Yeah, I mean, being part of an intuitive grower is, you're really reading the plant and you're looking at it to see what it's liking, what you're feeding it, and you're seeing how it's responding to that. You're seeing what it's, by the time you see something missing in a plant, most of the time you're too late, so you're really looking for cues way ahead of the time to see, to make sure you're not missing something. And, we've jumped all the way in. We're basically growing with all LEDs these days, which was quite a different learning curve. And like you mentioned, we're doing the under canopy lights, and there's so much that, intuitively you can do with what you're seeing and how you're feeding them. And you really get to vibe and see the different colors of the plants and the structure and the stems and the leaves. And you can see nutritionally how you're doing and what the plants, if they're responding to what you're giving them. If they're missing something, you can kind of they're showing you the roadmap of what they're going to be, if you know to look at the cues, if you've seen it enough times. But one of the biggest mysteries has always been is like, what's really happening inside that root ball. Like, yeah, you can open it up and you can take a look at your roots, but healthy roots don't necessarily mean everything that's going on. And when we were hand watering, we were picking up every pot every other day too, and it was like water to a spot. We were real organic. So it wasn't like we were trying to get tons of runoff or anything, but we wanted every other day when we picked up those pots, we were hoping that they were feeling dry. I wanted those plants to feel dry, but not show that they were dry. And if a plant was like 2 days later was really heavy, then you knew that you overwatered, or that plant was maybe didn't overwater, but that plant wasn't getting everything, wasn't really thriving like it needed to be. So we would make sure that, you would still get a little bit of water, but you would maybe even put a marker on that, like, hey, this one's not drinking as much. And just hopefully by underwatering it a little bit, you could get it to come back up to where it was participating in the rest of the canopy equally with the rest of the plant. So the technology, especially like with the Arroyo, has been huge to be able to see data of like what's happening. Like, okay, my plants are drinking, but how fast are they drinking? Or like, this one's really light, but at what point did it get too light? Like, okay, I come in, it's nice and light and it's not wilting yet, but like, what point did it get light? How much longer would it have been before it was trouble too? Because you're hand watering, you try and water at the same time every day, but you're not watering the same time every day like you are nowadays when you have a schedule and it's like 9 o'clock water. Okay, it's watering at 9 o'clock unless something happens. It takes a little longer to mix the res that day or something. So it's really, as an intuitive grower, you can get a vibe of your plants. They say, what's the best fertilizer? It's the gardener's shadow, right? Just being in there. And plants really do vibe with people. There's something about that. They're a living creature. They are kind of sentient beings, I believe. And they feel different people's energies. And so, you can kind of see what's happening and you can see that expression of the plant above ground, but you really don't know what's happening. So the development of the technology to monitor what's happening in the pot has been one of the biggest things, and it's, I wouldn't say it was like the easiest transition for me either too. I wouldn't say like, oh my God, like, yeah, I just did it. And I looked at my charts and I knew exactly what I was doing. I was, I'd show him my charts to my buddy, Bobby, and be like, what do you think? And he'd be like, oh yeah, it's cool. Great. Good. But, just to be able to like start watching patterns, and using you guys having the ability to have the like your office hours, to be able to like book hours and talk to Seth and to talk to Jason was like huge for me. And to like, oh, okay, what are you guys seeing? How am I interpreting this? And I think you go from this one spot too, where you go from, okay, I'm this intuitive grower and I don't really care about the charts. Now all of a sudden I have these charts, and then you can get too tied up in your charts and you start trying to get everything. I really want my charts to look good, so you spend all this time in front of your computer wanting your charts to look good. And then you need to be in the room to see what you're really seeing too. And like, okay, when that says this number, what does that equate to on the plant too? Like what is that number? Like, what's that number in hand feel? Like, okay, it says it's 20% water capacity, like 20%. What does that feel like? Okay. And what is it? And then like, how long till it actually does wilt? Does this plant in this medium we always have done like hard pots and hand packed pots, so, and we switch around our mediums. We're always trying something new. So what level? Some plants are happy at 16%. Some plants go down to 13% water content. You're reading online. You're trying to see what everyone else is doing too, and their crop steering methods. And they're like, I never go below 20%. You start doing that, and you realize your 20% is higher. And so it's really, you have to adapt all of this data to your unique set too. And it's one thing if you're in a rock wool and it's something, and it's really consistent, but I'm switching my stuff up all around. I'm such a like science guy. I like to experiment. And that was a hard learning curve for me to realize like, no, my system is unique to any other one. And you can look at percentage drybacks. That's really good to see like, what does it get to? Cause like, oh yeah, I go to 60% water capacity. Well, my plants will never get past 44% on my reading. So yeah.
Yeah. And I got to say, I think that's been one of the most fun things about working with you over the years, Mikey, is you put in the work to build a brand, which has allowed you to focus on some fun stuff like highlight Mikey's Dutch treat. Go get it if you're in California. But, coming from that intuitive approach and having success with that, you're able to take some of these tools and like you said, you kind of went through a whole phase of like, all right, chasing the graphs. Now we're chasing the plants, chasing the graphs, and then find a medium where you're like, hey, these tools really help me quantify what led to success. Because as we've seen, I remember talking to you probably about a year ago about a few strains that they're pretty old and had probably never been grown under LED, and transitioning those into this new system. And it's like, okay, well, how can we utilize what we know works under HPS for these strains, which some of them tend to be a little finicky compared to like what we'd call like a winter commercial strain now. Like you got to put in, like you said, the grower's shadow. You got to get in there, feel the plants, look at plant health, take those notes, and actually learn from it over time to produce a certain level of quality. And I think the hot term now is terroir, but I don't know if you have that in your indoor room. But more it's, maximizing that genetic to get the end result that you want, with a lot of, whether it's some of these older genetics or newer ones. One of the things we're seeing is that, hey, not all of these follow the basic crop steering outline that we look at and say like, hey, we've got our normal generative, vegetative, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, and harvest. They don't all land quite in that. And, right now I can't put a camera in there that's good enough and tell you exactly what those plants are doing morphologically. If I can get a grower in there who can learn the different cues that these plants put out. I mean, I've over the years, and Mike, I'm sure you see some interesting traits come off of some of these strains that, 15 years ago, none of us were thinking were that important. Like, oh, hey, it's weird. Okay, fast forward that 30 crops down the line inside of like 2 years in one of these facilities. And now you're looking at like, oh, hey, we've actually identified like some cool markers that, cannabis is new enough in the research. We haven't even identified that that's an actual marker that we can look at for phase changes or anything like that. Sometimes you get weird leaf morphologies. We all know there's plants that put on, I got a beautiful picture this morning, or maybe it's last night, but it was a funky genetic that put out these humongous bracts that were like 3 or 4 times the size of something typical you'd see. But this guy was growing just some beautiful, chunky, big bracts, super frosty. They weren't stretched out and not frosty or anything. And, that particular genetic took years of, I don't want to say research, but essentially research, practice growing it. And then finally we got some sensors on there and we were able to say, hey, wow, these certain things line up. This genetic will never run with some of these other ones on the same zone. We can make that choice. And now we can repeat it every time. You know, because sometimes those happy accidents exist out there. We like to call them here. But sometimes they're not accidents. Sometimes it's just something you've been working with and have been having a hard time nailing down why exactly it happens. You know, I mean, I've been working with a lot of rock wool growers lately that, hey, sometimes a buffering agent in rock wool will throw your pH really high, really low in the beginning, but you get enough water on there and it fixes itself. So is that a happy accident? Not necessarily, but it's a behavior that over time we were able to establish, like, hey, this is happening with this media. How do we work with it? And how do we make sure that every time we work with it, we're having success? Like Mikey's been able to switch up his media all the time because he can get that field capacity. He can understand how much water holding capacity he has and how long he can go without an irrigation. And that's, you know, I think one of the hardest things with growers, with growing in general, whether it's cannabis or anything else, you get locked into a specific style. And sometimes you have all the skills necessary to make a change, whether it's media, up, downsize, different type of media. But sometimes you just need like the right tools to help you evaluate what's going on and make the right decision.
Yeah, I think you hit on one thing there that has really made it fun to work with Mike, and that's, you know, he's built a brand, and he's, as he said, you know, he's stayed moderately sized. So one, you know, he's got that demand out there, he's got the reputation, he's got those years of growing experience, and it's really fun for him and for us to work with him because he doesn't have the limitations of, you know, working within an MSO where you can't make the choices that you want to make to improve your grow. He's in there every day looking at those plants. You know, he's the true head grower of this facility as well as the business operator and all of that. So it's really cool for us because he gets to lead the edge as far as what opportunities he takes, what resources he's deploying at the facility, and really leaving nothing to constraints.
Yeah, you know, and one thing that is, I think, Mike, you're a great example of, is putting in the work and looking at your business a little more long term and realizing that, you know, as much as all of us want to be growers and focus on that, branding, market presence, that's a reality that you have to establish. And then if you're capable of doing that or able to do it, you can kind of drive your own price point a little more down the line. You know, if you can establish like, hey, we've got these proprietary genetics, we grow in a very specific way, people start to pay for that. You can demand a market premium, but it kind of highlights that the scaling of this type of business is not linear. You know, for Mikey to go double the number of lights he's running, that's like tripling his own efforts. And, you know, like for Mikey, he's found value in being able to focus on something a little more specific, but get the return on the price point and steady sales. You know, that's one thing that, like, when I first started commercially, we had a brand. We also did a lot of white label sales.
What?
Yeah, that changed though, you know, about 2 years later. So the brand did kind of pay off over time, but it took that commitment to say like, hey, we are going to have to accept this subpar price until we actually get that market presence. But once we had it, we could drive that a little more, especially when 60% of what we were growing, no one else had, you know, and once you get that brand presence and reliability, you have this magical thing called repeat customers, right? It's beautiful.
Yeah, I think the brand, I mean, with the brand has been a very big deal. And I've definitely made multiple stabs at it. And I feel like I've failed many times. Like right now, I actually feel like we've done it pretty good launch out. And you got to hope that your first couple, 3, 4 stumbles out the gate, you didn't put the bad impression on people, right? You obviously don't reach that much of the market, but you have to make sure that you have to hope that you haven't ruined your chances. But I've also found mentioned the genetics is like having enough really good quality genetics is like, as soon as you have 100 pounds of one strain, you've just devalued that strain, right? Like unless you have a really big demand. So, I've got 4 tables in each of my rooms. We're small. We're 72 lights. We got 4 40-foot tables, of which 2 of them are single zone tables and 2 of them have 2 zones on them. So we can do up to 6 different strains per month, basically, in our facility. And if by keeping things scarce is how you are able to kind of keep the price up. So it's by, I only have 20 pounds of this. I've only got 15 pounds of this. My brand's taking up most of this. No, it's not available. Oh, you want something? Okay, my space is limited. You know, like if you really like the way that I grow and you really like my strains that no one else has, you know, I can demand a higher price for some of my things versus if I have, you know, hundreds of pounds of runts and everyone else has hundreds of pounds of runts, and that's what the price is kind of dictated by what the guy next door has too. So, and it's not just collecting a ton of genetics either, especially in this market. Like, unfortunately, like if I want to put something into a brand, I have to test at, you know, 28 to 30%, you know, basically if I want to put it into a jar. And so we found too that, hey, if some of the stuff that we have that's really good or around that doesn't test quite there, hits the 25%, now we're going to put it into 1/2 ounce bags and sell that and put it at a less price, but at least we're avoiding getting caught into the $800,000-$900,000 pound price that is the bulk market these days. You know, if I'm just out there and, you know, it happens too. I wouldn't say I'm never part of it. You know, we sold $700 pounds of cannabis, and it's part of this game. You know, I'm not in the. Someone said this the other day. Is like, I'm not in the cannabis storing industry. You know, like I'm in this cannabis growing business. So it's like, if I have it,
leave it on the shelf.
I can't. I'm proud of most of what I put out, but when my stuff isn't that great, I'm honest about it too, and I let them know. And at the same time, when my stuff is good, I'm not trying to tell people like, oh, this is, or you know, when it's not good, I don't tell them it's the best, and when it is really good, I let them know like, hey, this is really good, and it's worth what it is too. So, you know, there's being honest in this industry is always good too, and you know, being able to, you know, stand up to your word helps with, you know. It's a relationship industry, you know. I'm super like honored to know that everyone on this video right now I have a relationship with, you know, and it's goes beyond business, and I think that's part of what makes the cannabis industry so great at this period of right now, because we're all really small. Even the biggest guys in this industry are really small, and we're all it's not like we're really like racing against each other. It's like we're all driving down the freeway, like waving to each other, like, oh, you're going faster and your car's a little nicer, like, awesome, good job, you know, like, cool, I'm gonna upgrade mine here soon too. But like, we're all still cruising on the highway and we're all still moving along. So it's a cool industry that we have. It's sad that we've lost a lot. Being here in Mendocino, you know, like we have a lot of, it's really an outdoor and light depth area. You know, most of our cultivation's over the hill in the heat, and I'm here on the coast in the cold. So we're kind of the last ones left on the coast right now, it feels like. And we've lost a lot of really good operators because of the prices and what's happened in California. It's pretty sad. You know, I'm sure we've lost some not good operators too, but we've lost a lot of really good operators. So I just feel really fortunate to still be here, you know, like, it's gone through my mind of like, is being the last one standing a good thing or a bad thing? Should I have just gotten out like everyone else has got out way sooner? But we're tenacious, and you know, we've kind of considered ourselves too small to fail. You know, being an owner operator has its blessings and its curses. But yeah, when things hit the fan, I can be here every single day. You know, I can do most everything that has to happen in this facility. I know every single process that needs to happen in this facility, and our facility's not that big, so. You know, we don't have to look at the charts in 60 different rooms or 20 different rooms and like try and how am I going to manage irrigations? That would take me hours, right? I've got 2 different rooms. I can do that, and I can go through and walk through all my tables and see every plant, you know, and we can get here before the irrigations come, and we can lift up pots before they irrigate and see what's happening. And like, I think that's still one of the biggest things is like, you know, what do your plants feel like before they water? You know, I think going from the hand water days to my biggest fear was like, if I'm going to water all my plants at the exact same amount, like some are going to get overwatered and some are going to get underwatered. I just couldn't wrap my mind around like that. Like, how's that going to work? But of course, and when you have a bigger plant in a small pot, a little overwatered or a little underwatered doesn't make that big a difference. And you just kind of get them to adapt to what you're doing too, because, you know, they call it weed for a reason. You know, you can probably put a seed in the ground and pee on it, and it's something's going to come, right? And the coolest thing about this plant is that it responds to the human touch, you know? So you bend it, you give it this, it's so fast growing. It's from seed to harvest in as short as with autoflowers, as short as like 70 days or whatever. So it really responds. We can plant a fruit tree and you can see what you've done to it 7 years later or whatever, but cannabis is one of those things that's just like, wow, it really responds. And if you do something good, you're going to get flowers and they're probably going to be beautiful no matter what. But if you do things right, you can see the difference of like doing it right versus just doing it. It's like, oh, okay, I know this strain, but something happened that round, because those are some huge flowers that are extremely crystally and very, very smelly. So it's nice to be able to see that.
You probably don't even have to pee on it. It'll grow anyways, but that'll definitely give it some nitrogen to do better.
Yeah, it'll help it out.
If you want to give it like less of a chance, you could pee on it.
Yeah. I want to say, I think that is one really tough thing about this industry, and why we're kind of seeing, I mean, number one, when we look at like cannabis consumption overall, right? Like there's a limit. If we were in the alcohol industry, only so many people in the US drink. Only so many people smoke cannabis. So we definitely have a market cap. And fortunately, cannabis is an efficient enough crop versus like how much units, how would I put it? How many eighths you can get or whatever unit you want to sell out of like, let's say 5,000 square feet or 2,000 or 1,000. It's actually quite a bit. Like me off of my little one light setup, I can produce more than I need to smoke. No problem. Like very easily. So when you compound that, it really helps. Yeah. Yeah. When you break that out though, like to economies of scale, one really cool thing, we're seeing a lot of these bigger MSOs and stuff kind of take out market space and stuff, but I would say even more so than the alcohol industry, cannabis is ripe to be a cottage industry where we have producers like Mikey that can actually supply enough people to maintain a reasonable business from the revenue side and also not be too expensive for the consumer. And we kind of saw that a little bit in the beer market. It's kind of reconsolidated, but starting about 13, 15 years ago, really saw that craft brewery explosion, right? And a lot more people turned to buying six packs or whatever local. Yeah. Is what was on the shelf. And at a certain point, we saw some of these bigger companies like Anheuser-Busch, Molson Coors go in and start actually just investing in these smaller breweries because they realized they were losing market share. And, we haven't quite seen that yet as much in cannabis with some of these bigger companies. But long term, I think we're going to see a pretty big cottage industry. I mean, once you break the scale down to a manageable size, increasing quality becomes a lot easier. If I'm trying to manage 50,000 square feet of canopy with like 20 people, that's going to be really, really hard. And also I have so many moving parts. I've got all this processing cost and overhead. It's going to be hard to scale that up. Whereas if I approach it from the other way, smaller, and only add incrementally people as I need and keep it a little more slim, I've got a little bit more margin to work with there. Because Mikey, if you double the size of your building, you might double your product output, but you doubled the work. Now you got scheduling, now you got everything else. And I think people like buying their local quality product. It's already ingrained in the culture, I feel like, and that's as a person coming from a place growing up where we didn't have local weed.
Yeah,
so.
And I don't know about you, man, but I've grown a lot of different types of plants, and for me to perfect even 10 strains is asking for probably more than I could do.
And at the speed of the market too.
Yeah, it takes time. You got to invest in how that plant is growing, and you just can't have a huge menu and expect it to be top quality.
Oh, absolutely. I'll drop the Dutch treat again just because I love Mikey's Dutch treat. But
I was just going to say,
if he gave me a cut, it probably wouldn't be quite as good as his the first round or two, unless I called him up and said, "Hey, let's talk about what you've been seeing," and then look at the data.
Specialization's important, though. I mean, that's kind of one of those factors that can really make or break you if you are trying to be like, oh, I'm just going to grow anything and everything that someone asks me about. I'll, carve out a tray or something to throw anything someone gives me a cut of. You're going to make a lot of bad investment choices. And, California's prices have definitely kind of put pressure on our market to a point where you can't really be making a whole lot of those choices and still be around. And, when you specialize and you keep your operation small, like Mikey has, that's definitely one of those ways where you get to see the fruits of keeping only the selected varieties that are working well for you, and then experimenting, only as you see the need to put a strain into production. And I mean, you probably know this more than most people, Mikey, that lots of the beans that you pop aren't the ones you end up putting into flour. But, it's the expectation that you are going to get one of those keepers and throw it into that select lineup that keeps you popping those beans and making sure that you can find one of them. But you're not just going to run a whole room of fresh beans, dedicated to a pheno hunt because you would love to speed that process up.
Yeah, I mean, and we do take risks. Like even this week, as like example, last Friday actually, I don't have an R&D space really, so we did some R&D. We had 9 different phenos in our room, and Logan's going through the room, and he notices that 2 of them at day 16 have male flowers forming all over them. So it's like, oh my goodness, good. He gets the spray bottle, he wets them down just in case there's any stray pollen, and then pulls them out. And then this Tuesday we were leafing a room, and there was a strain, this Wi-Fi Z that one of my sales guys has been growing. And it's an incredible strain, and we've seen it, and it's beautiful, and we know how good of a strain it is. And we kind of took a risk, and we went ahead and put a half table in. And we went through on this Tuesday, and that table was throwing mad male flowers all over the place, So we just took 1/8 of our room out, it was a 12.5% loss instantly, on day 16. But I mean, it's way better than having to fresh frozen a whole room, or to be able to have to go with full seeds and stuff like that. And the rest of the room's banging. So it's okay. I'd rather take a 12.5% loss right off the bat, call it 13% with those other 2 missing over there too, than, losing a whole room. So we know better than to take risks, and we take risks. I just picked up this original Girl Scout clone, and I've, someone that wants this strain from me, and they want me to grow it. And I'm like considering putting in a half table before I do my normal, 1 plant, then 4 plant tester. So we're like talking about it as a team. Like, how do you guys feel? And, we're small. Like I said, we got 1,300 square feet, 72 lights. But it's definitely a maneuver.
I've heard that hermed out Girl Scout cookies is the best. That's the best old Girl Scout cookies.
Those are the chips. Those are the chips. Cookies, right there, the chocolate chips.
Since we're talking about genetics, we have one of our growmies here, Iron Armor, commented the Dutch treat is amazing. Haven't smoked that in years. Let's talk about what you are growing and what you're known for. I'm a huge fan of Dutch treat and pleasure. But yeah, break it down for us, Mikey. What you growing over there?
Yeah, so we still got that Viper cookies. Like when I mentioned that, we hunted in 2015. Got it
so good.
It's one of the strongest, knock you back, that one's too strong of a plant kind of. For me, I used to smoke it all the time, and now it's a nighttime only thing. And I have to say is we grew that in our 10-gallon pots, our hand water. We're still trying to figure out how to really to dial it in this method. How long of a veg do we need? We do get that thing where sometimes our tops there end up being smaller than our under canopy buds, and is it that a leaf temperature thing? Is it some sort of an irrigation thing? So we're still trying to nail that one down. But the Dutch treat, that was a local cut that came over from Hawaii, from Maui, I believe, in 2007, was grown here on the coast for a long time. And as soon as the rec came along, it really there was no value really in the traditional market anymore. So I got that from a grower locally and was able to put that into production. And we grew a half table, and I was like, I didn't think it was that great. And I brought it to Hall of Flowers, and people started smelling it. And I remember people would grab it and they'd smell it, and the first thing they'd do is they'd hold it to their heart. And it was our first attempt with it. It was a horrible round. And I remember calling back up and being like, oh my God, guys, we're going to do the Dutch treat again. We're like, really? Yeah, okay, let's try it again. And it went from like a 12-pound half table to like up to 43-pound full tables, you know? So it's crazy. It wants to go too big. So our typical veg time is like somewhere between, is like, let's call it 12 days is like what we call a typical veg time. So things that grow a little slower, need to get bigger, we'll clone them earlier. And the Dutch treats veg time is 6 days. And we put it in this little tiny plant, and it's the biggest plant in the room by far. It's like getting up to the lights every time. So it's like almost maybe we need a 4-day veg on it. I don't know. This last time was the first time we actually grew it with the under canopy, because we thought we had it before, and we had a little mix up in our clone room, in our mom room, and we grew a whole round of Blue Dream because it's very sativa looking too. So
I was gonna joke about Blue Dream earlier. That's hilarious. You bring
Blue
that up.
Dream.
It's coming back.
I love Blue Dream.
A really good new one called the Woodsy, which is like a very much Skittles cut, but it's like a OG cookies crossed to Skittles, like 5, 6, 7 times over, that came to us from Covelo. Someone had hunted it in the light depth, and they re-vegged it, and we got it back, and they gave it to us because, oh, you guys like to grow Skittles, and which we don't. I wouldn't say we like to grow Skittles, but something that we definitely do grow Skittles because the market wants it, and we've gotten good. And luckily, there's a thing called under canopy lights right now that make growing Skittles like actually possible, because, like I say, we have a 12-day as our normal veg. This Woodsy and the Skittles, the Z, have a 25-day veg.
Yeah.
and you clone, sometimes we'll clone 200 cuts to get 100 to survive, but we've gotten a little better than that recently. But
I love that comment, Mikey, because I get the how do you grow the Z all the time, and I'm like, it sucks.
Yeah.
What else to tell you, dude? Like it's gonna be tough. Take your overages, plan to have some failure. Like not necessarily, yeah.
Easy, and it's ugly, and you're just like, oh, but then everyone loves it. So you're like, okay.
Yeah, they're like, why is it so rare? Like, well, grow it, find out.
Yeah. Yes. Like, oh, I've got 20 pounds of Z and 6 pounds of Z small. It's like, oh, great.
Yeah.
not the best ratios for you, you know.
Yeah.
We've got this our headbanger. We got this cut recently, a headbanger, which is Karma's Sour Diesel by the Biker Kush. Incredible. That one's coming down in 19 days. It's an unstoppable force. I can't say enough good things about that. I've been working with my good friend Justin out in Covelo, Mendoza, and he's a pheno hunter extraordinaire and a real like top of the line connoisseur hash head. And his opinion and his experience with terps is just like, I trust anything that he says. So I've shared some of my genetics with him, and he's reciprocated saying, hey, some of these things I think would really do good indoors, because he's all organic, light depth, and all in sun grown. So he's like, hey, I see some of these things and I know what you could do with them. So we've got this new Neons cut that we're loving. I've got the Grumpy Tiger, which I've shared with my friend Joseph from Snowtill, and he's growing that living soil, and it's just crushing for him. It's just one of the frostiest, most beautiful plants. And as a cultivator, it's one of those plants that you watch growing and vegging, and you're like, you're just drawn to it. It has such a nice structure and such a good spacing, and it's one of those that you want to grow. We're bringing back in the Mendo Crumble. The Mendo Crumble was a seeds I hunted from CSI Humboldt. It was like a Mendo Perps by Girl Scout Cookie Cross that was like the 11th out of 10 seed, 11th seed out of 11 that was like different than all the rest. It's like a total recessive trait, but it's this huge monster plant that grows. It's like the only clone I've seen that'll outgrow a seed plant outdoors. And it won the overall highest terpenes in the 2001 Emerald Cup. So it was like a 400 entries, indoor, outdoor, light depth, everything. It was the highest terpene braid. So that was really cool to see that. And we're bringing that one back in. So I'm really happy about that. We've got a ton of stuff that I could keep going. I got a list of things that we're putting into the rotation. The Pleasure, like you mentioned, that was from my friend John at Crane City. I got that. It's basically a Runs by Skittles cross, but it's a lot more than that. It's super fast growing. I think it's got one of the best nose profiles out there. It's super flavorful. For me, a real winner of a strain is something that you can like put a roach down in an ashtray and pick it up tomorrow, the next day, light it up and know exactly what strain that is, because so much of the weed that we smoke is just tastes like weed. You're like, oh, I'm smoking weed, but it's just like burning. It's burnt. It's not that flavor. And I think that's what we're really looking for as a real keeper. And especially you're seeing these days, I think that there's a lot of focus on quality and flavor and how does things smoke. And the people that are getting the highest dollars are these really small grows, a lot of these indoor living soil. A lot of it's, some of it's marketing, but, it's a lot of high quality coming from these things. And it's that smaller grow that the person can really put their life intention into. That's where the highest quality is coming out. Like Seth was saying, 50,000 square feet, the bigger you get, the harder it is to manage everything. So it is like, I don't want to double overnight. I would love to be able to double my size for when it goes federally legal so that I could actually get my product to more people and maybe even be able to go a little bit international. But I don't want to do that overnight. I'd like to do it real intentional, and I'd like to build even smaller rooms. Honestly, I think the future is continuing to build small rooms. It's more expensive, but smaller rooms like my Dutch treat, I take it at 9 weeks. I could take that another. It's done and it's beautiful and people love it. But if I took it another week and a half or even 2 weeks, sometimes I'm sure I could get a whole another level out of it, it'd be really nice to be able to have rooms that are custom built for plants and be like, no, I want to take you 73 days, and have extra, dry space open for that to be able to do that. And so, it takes a lot of redundancy. You have to have extra dry spaces. You have to have extra veg spaces. You have to have rooms. You have to plan these things out. I'm looking out. I know my harvests from now until December, and I know when my clone dates are roughly, and I have an idea of what I want to do. And I've gotten to this point too recently where, especially when I'm testing things, I'm making extra trays of clones of strains that I'm not sure that I'm going to put in, because by the time it's like just harvesting in one room, I want to get some tests down on it. So I'll have extra strains, because by the time I actually need to plant it in a room, it takes so long to mom something up. And even if you had it mommed up, it takes an extra 2 weeks to root it. So I'll have these things. I'll take an extra couple different strains for the room, my next veg room plant, and not knowing which one. I'm still trying to keep my I know there's 6 strains going in. I've got 8 strains cloned. And that we know that 4 or 5 of these are definitely solid that we're going to do. And then the last second, we're like, okay, we're doing those and we're killing all of those. So, we just learned to try and keep our options open, because we are small. We don't have unlimited veg space. I don't have unlimited mom space. And we got the OGZ. It's a beautiful plant. Its veg is incredibly slow, oh, I really want some more of that. Okay, great. Well, it's taking me 3 months to make a mom. Then I have to cut the clones. Like if someone says they really love something of mine, like, I love this, I really want this, it takes me 6 months from now to get that to you.
Yeah, even in a, not a huge grow, right? That's just a limitation of how long it takes to grow a plant and how long this process takes. And that's one thing that I think does make it difficult in this progressive market, and part of why it's worth it for growers to try to find those strains. Not only that they're good at growing, but like something that's unique. We all have to play the game, right? Like there's right now, if it doesn't have runts in the name or gelato, like it's kind of hard to sell on the open brokerage market, but that's where that legwork of building a brand and everything else comes in. And obviously that's way easier said than done. But I think for anyone that's looking to get into this and have long-term success, it's really important to kind of look at how different scales have done it, people on different sizes, and realize that like, hey, no matter if you're going from 1,000 square feet all the way up to 50, there is a way to be successful, but you got to cover all your bases. Like when we talk about like Mikey doubling his footprint, okay, cool. But that doesn't just extend to cultivation, that extends to marketing, sales. Like there's more contact points that just literally takes more hours to get all of that out into the world. And I think when we look at, more traditional ag, basically, we're still growing a plant, right? And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you are and how you look at it, cannabis isn't getting any kind of government subsidies. We're not getting crop insurance, not getting water rights or water subsidies. So you've got to really, really put effort into, especially at this point in the game on the West Coast, quality, and the definition of quality I don't think any of us here will argue about, but we can argue about on a greater scale, whether it's purple that does it, high THC, high terps, high test results, whatever. But you've got to establish that point and kind of stick to it for a while and realize that, hey, no one, now that we're in a more legal space, your cannabis startup is a lot more like starting a restaurant, coffee stand, bar, construction company, whatever. Like, look 2 years in the future to make money. You're gonna have to reinvest. You're gonna have to pay stuff off, and most likely, most of the people getting into this industry don't have 10 or 20 million to start out with and say, hey, I'm going to spend 5 million building my place and I got 15 for operating costs till we make money. So it's more of a traditional farming model where as you go, you've really got to watch your input costs and how much you're putting out and just work with what you have right now and realize that you are still a farmer. It's still all about, what did we harvest? What can we sell? What's the money in the bank account? How much is this next crop going to cost? And that's the probably least exciting part about all of that as a grower. Something like if I talk to an accountant, they'd be like, well, that sounds fun. Let's plan this. And I'm like, I just want to grow my weed, But it's reality. Like it's hard work. You have to put in the legwork and you got to cover all your bases. Like I know a lot of really good growers that their biggest difficulty is that they're too focused on growing plants, I want to say, and that sounds bad, but not able to work with other people to get that bigger picture stuff taken care of because, man, I've met a lot of people who put out some really amazing cannabis, but struggle on the business side to keep things ahead, whether it's overhead costs, marketing, overproduction. Like you mentioned, Mikey, that's a huge one. I myself have thrown away way too much Blue Dream and GG4 about 4 or 5 years ago because we hit a point in Washington where everyone had it. And like that was a hard lesson. But when you're sitting there dumping out like 50 pounds of weed and you're like, that's my wages, suddenly it will start to hit. And then it's like, okay, well, that is also going to happen sometimes. Even if you try really hard, like if you're able to maintain $1,000 to $1,300 pound price, sometimes if you're out there taking chances, which you have to, you're going to get $600-700. Okay, well, let's plan for the worst. Let's plan for the worst and hope for the best, not the other way around, right? Which is not as exciting for everyone, but that's farming.
Well, you guys, we are at a point in the show. We've got about 10 minutes left. And I wanted to ask one question since Mikey is on. If you have some insights into this question, we'd love to hear them. But y'all want to tackle a little bit of an overview question we got from one of the Gromies. This one came from North Fork Farms on Instagram. They wrote, I was thinking, can we do a deep dive into powdery mildew? So many growers love to claim it lives within the plant. I think they falsely use the term systemic. However, doesn't most research point to it being a topical mildew? For example, sometimes I'll have a room super dialed in with proper VPD and still see a bit here and there. Is that a VPD swing? Why does it pop up when things seem so perfect? Thank you guys as always. Literally listened and re-listened to each and every podcast. We appreciate you, North Fork Farms. But yeah, powdery mildew. Let's break it down for everybody, guys.
In 10 minutes, we cannot do a deep dive into powdery mildew.
No.
I'll sum it up with two words.
Scratch the surface on this one.
Usually when we're talking about indoor grows, if your VPD, your temps are on point, got enough dehu, cleanliness. So powdery mildew, unlike other it's a mildew, not a mold. But when we're looking at Botrytis aspergillus, that really flourishes below 70 degrees. 55 to 70 is where that's super happy, growing aggressively. Powdery mildew can be happy up into the 70s, unfortunately. So probably the biggest challenge that I see indoor growers struggle with is dehus, ACs, hard to clean places where you just have a repository of spores that you're never getting rid of. So even though you're treating it, you might see it reduce but never get rid of. And I'd love to hear Mikey's take because he's in prime PM and Botrytis country over there in Mendocino. They grow everything perfectly, vegetables, fruits, but it makes it harder to grow your weed.
We grow PM really good here too.
The best PM on the market.
Yeah. I mean, we're right next to the ocean. It's always moist here, right? Like there's no like, oh yeah, it's raining right now. It's like we have moisture every single morning on the ground. There's no dry time of the year. So, keeping your VPD in check, right? Like never letting it drop below, say 0.8 at night. If you can avoid that, it's always good. Using those like chlorine dioxide gases when you clean your room while running your air conditioning and your dehum, I found that works really good to like clean out any of those spores. Like if you like clean your room but you don't have your dehums and your air conditioners on, yeah, then you turn it back on, those spores are hitting in all of those radiators and stuff like that and all the fans. So that's a big thing. Yeah, you're just putting it right back in there. You know, typically it should show up more when it does in the end of the round when you're cooling things down. That's what we kind of find. And obviously some plants are going to be way more susceptible than others. You're going to have a plant that's covered right next to one that isn't. It's not something that when we see, we freak out horribly. You know, I try and remove the plant, the leaves, the physical removal of the leaves. But if it's getting bad, then it's something we did. You know, we use a sulfur-neem spray in the beginning and there before flower. I know you're not supposed to mix sulfur and neem, but we mix sulfur and neem and it's very effective. It's a quarter to half a teaspoon of sulfur, micronized sulfur. We use the Kosovet and an ounce of neem per gallon with a little soap. Works incredible. If you don't believe me, spray one plant, you know, don't let the light get on it before it's fully dry. But another thing that we've actually done recently that's worked really well is taking the continuum from Impello Bioscience, which is like basically like a bacterial thing, and spraying our plants, even our blooming plants, so even 3 weeks into bloom, and spraying the leaves of that. And it's kind of doing is inoculating the leaves with the bacteria already on it. So it kind of is coating your plants with something that's already going to like take up the space for when that powdery mildew wants to come in. I can't answer whether it's systemic or not. I don't believe that. Like I've heard people saying, "Oh, once the plant's had powdery mildew once, it's in it forever. It's going to pop up." I don't see that. I don't. You know, it pops up on the leaf first. I don't think it's popping up on the roots. That's a perfect spot for it to grow in down there. You know, it's. I have seen it bad in being on the stalks, but I believe that it's always around where I live. It's always around, and it's just waiting for the right conditions. And if the conditions get right, it's going to happen. It's just like yeast on wine grapes. You know, there's yeast on all of our fruits, and that's why the fruits have a nice waxy coating to them, as it protects them from the natural yeasts and molds and bacteria that are floating around our environment.
Yeah, I think the word there is systemic versus ubiquitous. Like if it's always around, yeah, it might seem systemic, but I do want to give one little bit of insight on the powdery mildew. I used to run research greenhouses and breeding greenhouses. We're constantly inoculating peas and other crops with powdery mildew. The way I would preserve my powdery mildew and actually like preserve different, strains and species of powdery mildew is grabbing an infected plant, put it in a Ziploc baggie and throwing it in the freezer. Next fall, I'd rip that thing open, go spread it around, inoculate my greenhouse, and now we're growing powdery mildew. And why I wanted to bring that up is like those spores are tough, man. Like even up here, Eastern Washington, Northern Idaho, there's certain crops you can go out and you can see powdery mildew that looks like snow in a field in like the end of September.
I was going to comment,
beginning of October.
I live in one of the drier places, and there shouldn't be powdery mildew, but there are certain species of sage that you can walk out and find powdery mildew in the driest part of the year around here. And, they're just susceptible to it. And pretty much any time in the summer, even though it's dry here, I can go out and walk around my yard and find a couple of plants that are, shaded in certain areas that will continually grow powdery mildew. So,
yeah. And I kind of want to hit on, a couple things that were being said here is obviously the question was ended with talking about VPD. Mikey obviously mentioned, hey, we see this a lot towards the end. The better that we can stabilize our environments. So if we're doing nighttime, daytime differences, let's ramp that, right? We want to stay as far away from dew point as possible in order to reduce that. If we can reduce microclimates as well. So stabilizing and unifying that environment is going to help tremendously, especially if we do have healthy plants in a clean room, right? So let's start step by step. Obviously, those are things that you just can't avoid. You got to have a clean room. You got to get those plants nice and healthy. But then let's also get to our environment. And that's obviously having good HVAC equipment, programming your HVAC equipment to run well. Like I said, stabilizing. We don't want
change your filters, maintenance. That's never got me before.
You do that part. Yeah, so rampant. Stay away from dew point. No VPD swings that happen fast, I guess was what I wanted to add on there.
Oh yeah. When your lights go out, this sounds kind of weird, but go in there and look around sometimes. You might be surprised at some of the microclimates that exist. I know personally, we've run into a bunch of places where people have some beautifully ducted airflow. And unfortunately, the AC air that they're pushing through there when they're trying to drop that overnight temp is like, it's coming out at like 36 degrees. Well, then they get a lot of condensation on the duct. And now you've got a different problem where you've got condensation, dew point raining down on your plants. And that isn't something that you have visibility on really, unless you actually go check that. Right back to getting in the room, understanding what's going on. And there's always going to be a human element to this, right? Like, but I think the important thing to remember is like my touch feel gauge on temperature and humidity is only as good as the thermometer and hygrometer that I'm holding. So the more you can dial that, the more you can use technology in tandem with your own personal feels to actually get something done. And I'll definitely say my personal feel, I've compared this a lot, is really jaded depending on if I walked from a 20-degree day outside into a nice 80-degree grow room. If I'm more or less hydrated that day, like there's so many little factors that go into what I actually feel. But if I can dial what I feel, man, I can go through and do a lot of analysis very quickly, even if it's not super scientific down to an insanely precise level. It's at least still efficient. And if I have my tools helping check me, I'm way farther ahead.
Amazing, you guys. Well, you've given the Gromies a lot to think about. We also dropped in the chat, we have a whole education guide talking about powdery mildew that I worked very hard on. I wrote that. So feel free to dip into that, get a little bit more insight. But we've reached that point. We're at the end of the show. Before we go, Mikey Strupp from Woodwide, we are so grateful that you came on the show. Tell folks where they can find you.
Yes, you can find me on Instagram, Mendo_Mikey_Lion. You obviously have to type the whole thing in because I'm shadow banned to the future here. Maybe they're going to change that. You can also find us at Woodwide High Craft. Woodwide's the name of our brand. We were kind of slowly making our way out into the California market. We want to put out the best quality flowers. I'm not trying to be the highest priced. I just want to sell ours for a fair price and get it to the people. And, I think that we're just putting out the highest quality that we can and just getting it out there. So please give a follow. Love to. I'm pretty good about getting in touch with people. I also get a little anxiety on the Instagram. I hate feeling like I'm beholden to someone that I've never met when I'm not even talking to my friends in real life sometimes. So
that's the journey, right? I'm a big fan of Woodwide. So quality is top notch. Love that you are getting more of the word out there. Congratulations to you for that. And good luck with everything. We are big fans of yours and look forward to following your journey. All right, guys, with that, Seth, Jason, Cian, and of course, producer Chris, thank you guys for another great session of Office Hours. Thank you all for joining us for this week's show. To learn more about Arroyo, book a demo at arroyo.io, and our team will show you the ins and outs of the ultimate cannabis cultivation platform. If you have any crop steering or cultivation questions you want us to cover, if you dropped a question, we didn't get to it today, don't worry. You can feel free to drop them anytime in the Arroyo app. Email us at sales@arroyo.io. Send us a DM on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. We want to hear from you, and we will get to your question. If you're a fan of the pod, please leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We appreciate your feedback, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. Thanks, y'all, and see you at episode 127.
Thank you.
Bye.